Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of your math class. We are starting on lesson 2 now, and we're going to start talking about equivalent proper fractions. Now, you've probably heard the word equivalent before. We did it in our ratios unit, and I just want you to look at the letters first. And equivalent. You can hear the word equal in there, and so what that really means is that equivalent fractions are the same fractions, exactly the same, but they are represented by different numbers. Let's take a look at these examples and really examine them. As we can see here, I want you to imagine this is a pizza, okay? If you were to cut it in half and eat half of it, you'd be eating half the pizza. And if you cut it in 4 and you still ate this side, you'd still be eating half the pizza, but instead it's been cut into 4 pieces and 2 of them have been eaten. As we move up, we can cut the pizza into 8 pieces, and you're still going to eat half, but instead of eating a whole piece of half pizza, you're going to eat 4 individual slices. And even if we cut the pizza into 16 equal pieces, you would still be eating half, but you'd be eating it in 8 different sizes, different pieces. So that's why they say that equivalent fractions are the same fraction. As you can see, it's always 1/2 of the left side of the pizza that's being eaten, but it's just represented by different numbers because it depends on how small we want to make that fraction, how small we want to cut it up, right? We could cut this up into a million little pieces. You wouldn't get very much out of it, but it would be represented by the same amount of space. It's just shown in different numbers. The same thing goes for my bar chart. I just want to take note that as the fractions started to get smaller, my accuracy started to diminish. And what I mean by that is that these are not all equal sizes. A fraction is always divided into exactly perfect equal portions. But my drawing skills, they're not the best. So please forgive me and imagine in your mind that these are all divided up equally. You can see it's pretty equal over here, kind of equal over here, and then I kind of lost it. But the same goes for this bar chart here. So here there are 3 pieces, and 1 piece is shaded. So that represents a fraction of 1/3. As we move on to the next piece, the same portion is shaded, except now instead of being 3 pieces, it's 9 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Instead of being 1 portion shaded, it's 3. As we move on here, we even divided it again. We put a line through to make it 18 pieces, but now 6 of them are shaded. So again, I want you to remember to keep in your mind at all times that that's what an equivalent fraction is. If you can simplify the fraction down to the original fraction, that's the best thing to do when you're working with equivalent fractions, and that's what we're going to do as we move forward. Now, one of the tasks that you're going to do that is going to make this a lot easier for you is to glue a 100 chart into your journal, right where you're working on fractions. Reason being is we are going to start finding the highest common divisor between 2 numbers. And that can be kind of tricky to remember. For some of them, you might know right away. When you see a 7/14, you'll know right away the highest common divisor is a 7. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to work on those questions after. So you can do 2 things. You can work backwards by simplifying a fraction and finding the lowest common multiple, but you also can create an equivalent fraction, and that's kind of where we start so we can get our minds sort of thinking about this idea. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 1/2 and I am going to create an equivalent fraction for it. And in order to do that, I just have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. Now, in our ratios unit, I always said to you, whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right. Well, the same thing goes for fractions. Whatever you do to the top of this fraction, you have to do to the bottom because it's one number together. It represents a half. Just because there are 2 smaller numbers, it doesn't mean they always have to go together. They always have to go together. They represent 1 portion, so whatever you do to the top of that number, you have to do to the bottom. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong answer. It's not how we work with fractions. Please don't forget, whatever you do to the top, the numerator, you have to do the same thing to the bottom, okay? And what always helps me with that is here I wrote multiply by 9, but what I like to do is I like to go multiply by 9 and multiply by 9. And that way I always remember that whatever I do the top, I do the bottom. So I'm going to create an equivalent fraction right now by multiplying the bottom by the top. So I know that one group of 9 is 9. And I know that two groups of 9 is 18. So there I have an equivalent fraction that I've created. It still represents 1/2 because I know that 9 is half of 18. So I'm getting an equivalent fraction of half right away. All right, let's do the next one we have here. The next one is 3/4 or 3/4. And they're asking us to create it by using a multiple of 2. So again, I'm going to put my little 2 there just so I remember that I have to do both of them. And I know that 3 groups of 2, or 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. And I know that 4 groups of 2, or 4 multiplied by 2 is 8. And that's how you create an equivalent fraction. The next one here, I have 7/8, or 7/8. And they're asking me to get an equivalent fraction by multiplying it by 3. So again, like I said, I'm going to do this because it makes it a little bit easier on me so I can visualize that I know I have to multiply both numbers because they belong together. They're a unit. And now I know that 7 multiplied by 3, 7, 14, 21. Or I could take a look at my multiplication chart. And 8 multiplied by 3, 8, 16, 24. The next one, I have 12/24. Right away I'm going to look at that number and I know that 12 is half of 24. So I know that it's representing a half. And it's only asking me to multiply it by 1. So again, I'm going to put my little multiplication symbol. And I know that the equivalent fraction that they want me to find is the same one as both before. All right. So most of the time what you're going to get is you're going to get a fraction like this one that obviously looks like it can be simplified, just like the ratios we did in our ratio unit, okay? And you are going to have to simplify it. Now, for this first question, I've already put the divide symbol because I know that the highest common divisor, now what the highest common divisor means is which number can go into both of these numbers. I know that 2 can, but I don't think any others can, so that the highest common divisor is 2. You can always use a 100ths chart or a multiplication chart to help you find your highest common divisor, all right? So I know for this one that it is 2, so I'm going to divide 8 by 2. I'm going to divide 10 by 2, and I'm going to get my answer. So how many times can 2 go into 8? Well, I could take a look at my multiplication chart and see the number 2, and I know that 2 can go into 8 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So then I will write 4. And then the next one, how many times can 2 go into 10? Well, let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 10 divided by 2, or how many times 2 can go into 10, is 5. You can also use a calculator once you've figured out what the lowest common, the highest common divisor is. Let's look at this one. They haven't given us the answer here. So I have to look at this number and I have to think, okay, what is the highest common divisor between these numbers? I'm going to show you how you can do that using a multiplication chart. Some of you in your mind right now, you might be like, oh, I know that right away. But I want to make sure that we use a multiplication chart just so we can understand what it means. I'm going to look at all of the different columns, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find a column that has both of the numbers that are in my fraction, which is 6/8. So I look at the 1, yes, there's a 6 and an 8. And I look at the 2, and there's also a 6 and an 8. And I look at the 3, and there's only a 6 and there's no 8. And I look at the 4, and there's an 8 but no 6. And as I start to go higher, I'm going to find out that they no longer have both numbers in the row. So I'm going to go back up to my 2, because now I've discovered that 2 is my highest common divisor because it has both numbers in its row, and it's the highest one. 1 also has both numbers, right? It has a 6 and an 8. But 2 is the highest common divisor that has both numbers in the line. 3, 4, we don't see both of them any longer in it. And even if you like looking at it the column way, you can see it's 6 and 8 there instead of looking at the row way, which is 6 and 8. So I know that my common divisor is 2. So I now know that my common divisor is 2, so I can go ahead and do my math problem. And I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm going to divide it by 2. All right, so 6 divided by 2, how many times can 2 go into 6? 3 times. I can look at my multiplication chart if I need to. And how many times can 2 go into 8? Oh, I already did it over here. I know that it's 4. So that is how you simplify a fraction into an equivalent fraction. The next one and the last one we have here is 12 over 24. I'm going to take a look at my multiplication chart now. Now I want to find the highest common divisor for 12 and 24. All right, so I have to figure out which lines have both 12 and 24. I'm going to start off with my 2. It has 12 and 24. Let's see if 3 does. 3 also has 12 and 24. So right now that's my highest common divisor. I can forget about the 2. Let's see if 4 does. Oh, 4 does as well. So 4 now is my highest common divisor. I'm going to go down to 5. I know my 5, so I know it's not going to be in there. 6 also has 12 and 24. We're starting to see how the numbers get closer together. You'll know that you have the highest common divisor as they start to become closer together. I know that 7 does not have 12 in it. I know that 8 does not have 12 in it. I know that 9 doesn't, so I can pass through there. 10 won't, 11 doesn't. But look at, there it is, 12. The highest common divisor for both of these numbers is 12. As you go into 13, you won't see 12 anymore because 13 is a higher number than 12. And there they are stuck together. I know that my highest common divisor for 12 over 24 is 12. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I can go right to my fraction here. I discovered that the row with both 12 and 24 at its highest down the chart is going to be 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1. And 24 divided by 12 is 2. And that makes sense because 12 is half of 24. All right, so you have learned how to use and work with equivalent fractions and how to simplify them. Please check the board for the assignments that you are going to do. And do not forget to do your exit slip.